Here in Washington, President Biden speaking with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This call has just completed, we understand. It's been a long one. This is the first time these two leaders have spoken since Russia invaded Ukraine. A critical call at a critical moment. So let's bring in White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks along with ABC's Alex Perche in Washington for more. So Mary Alice, what can you tell us?
Yeah, like you said, a long call, Terry, nearly 2 hours. We haven't had a formal readout from the White House yet, but we're starting to get some word actually from the Chinese president and his team. And I have to say, I'm a little bit surprised by this language. It would suggest that the call went well from the United States perspective, at least. This initial readout from the Chinese saying the Ukraine crisis is something we don't want to see. Relevant events once again show us that state-to-state relations cannot go to the point of confrontation. Conflict and confrontation are not in anyone's interest. So far, the United States has been so frustrated with China's unwillingness to formally condemn Russia's actions in Ukraine. And then this part is also interesting in this statement, China writing, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council and the world's two largest economies, we must not only lead the development of China-U.S. relations on the right track, but shoulder our due international responsibilities and make efforts for world peace. Now, of course, actions speak a lot louder than words. The United States will be looking so closely to see what China actually does in the coming days and weeks. But I would imagine that the United States will feel good about this statement. At least it seems like China was taking notice of what the United States had to say.
Well, it sounds good, but as you say, the rubber meets the road in their actions, and a lot of that verbiage is just kind of feel good, please stop the war stuff. And the question still remains, would the United States hold China accountable if China does choose to help Russia? That's really the big question here. And how does the United States do that? I know that Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned China that there would be costs imposed if China answers Russia's request for military aid. What would that look like?
Yeah, that's a million-dollar question, Terry. The White House has not said what it would look like. They've talked about these consequences, but they have not specified what those consequences would be. Of course, it's hard to imagine the West uniting and lobbying sanctions against China like they did against Russia. But when they talk about options on the table, it's most likely economic punishments. That's what we imagine. But of course, the United States is not only worried that China might help out Russia economically, help them avoid the pain of these sanctions that they are dealing with, but they've been very worried that China would also contribute militarily. And then it raises the question, is there some other way to respond to China besides more sanctions?
Yeah, that is a hard problem, and we'll see what comes out of this call in addition to that language that you read us. Mary Alice, thanks for that. Now, in New York, the United Nations Security Council is holding a meeting called by Russia at the United Nations Security Council to discuss what Russia says is chemical and biological weapons that might be deployed by Ukraine. There's the United States government says there's no evidence. There's another false claim that the Russians have made. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations spoke out ahead of that meeting. Let's listen to her.
This meeting and these lies are designed for one purpose and one purpose alone: deflect responsibility for Russia's war of choice and the humanitarian catastrophe it has caused.
All right, let's go to Alex Perche now. Alex, President Biden has also warned that Russia would pay a severe price if it uses chemical weapons in Ukraine. Now, that's a question, because while President Biden has said, every inch of NATO territory will be defended, but there will be no U.S. boot on the ground in Ukraine. What is the American response? What kind of consequences would there be if, as the Pentagon fears, Russia deploys and uses chemical weapons?
Well, Terry, we saw the White House kind of telegraph and get the ball rolling on this earlier this week and a little bit last week. But the House voting to suspend normal trade relations with Russia and Belarus, which allows the president to impose higher tariffs or more tariffs on Russian and Belarusian exports. And this is something that happened yesterday. It also gives the president the ability to specifically specifically levy sanctions against individuals that support either Russia or these Belarusian aggressions against Ukraine. And something else that was interesting from that pre-buttal, if you will, from Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield is she brought up that she chastised Russia for abusing its position in the Big Five, saying that it must be said that Russia is abusing its responsibilities and privileges as a permanent member of the Security Council. Again, as you mentioned, this was a meeting that Russia called to basically lay out